Everyone for joining us. I guess we'll kick this off with a little bit of an introduction for everybody. I will introduce myself to start. My name is Melissa Cameron Passley. I am the A&R at SOCAN in Toronto. I'll give you a little bit of a background on where I come from and maybe what SOCAN is. I should start there actually before I even talk about myself here. SOCAN is Canada's largest music rights organization. We handle performing rights and we also handle reproduction rights for Canadian creators, whether you be a songwriter, a publisher, or a composer. I can get a little bit more into that a little bit later if there are questions about SOCAN in particular, but I am here to moderate this panel. So how about I kick it off and we start with Martin. Do a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Martin. I'm from a group called Blitz Berlin, which specializes in making music for film and television and movie trailers and advertisements and all that kind of stuff. So I'm here today to talk about making music for movies.
All right. We'll move into the box above my head, how it is for me anyways. We'll go on to Michelle.
Hey, I'm Michelle. I'm a film composer. I also write music for commercials as well. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and moved to Canada 7 years ago. And yeah.
All right. And Terry.
I'm Terry Benn, and I am a lot newer to the game of film composing than the two other composers here. I'm from the Kingston area, and my background is music production, which kind of I went into from playing in bands and kind of evolved into production, and then I kind of got a little whiff of the scoring bug in 2016 when I had a friend reach out. He was doing his first indie film, and then that kind of, I did a couple little things for him, and then it sort of, I refocused to production again. And then Michelle and I actually met. We're actually dating, we're actually partners that way. And we met, and Michelle is a fantastic established composer. So I've been kind of getting drawn back into the world of film scoring, which has been great. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, you actually just led right into what my next kind of questions were going to be for you. So, how it all began for everyone. So, it seems like you've all had different paths of discovery when it comes to composing for film and television. So I wanted each of you to maybe walk us through how you got started. Maybe we'll move over to Michelle to pick that up.
Sure. So my background is actually classical piano. So I've played for a very, very long time. And I actually went to university when I was in my late 20s, and I didn't really know too much about film scoring, but at that time, and it was something I was always interested in. And I had some opportunities come through my university where some film students came in, and they were pitching their films, and I was really keen, and I put my hand up for those, and yeah, I just really loved the opportunity, like, to collaborate with directors and producers, and I felt like from there it was something that I just wanted to pursue, and it's been doing it ever since. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And Terry, how did you get started in like music in general? When you first began?
Yeah, so I played in punk rock bands actually for
okay.
I toured with a punk rock band. We did roughly 650 shows in our tenure across Canada. We didn't really do much in the States or anywhere else, but we did a lot of Canadian touring. Around around 2007, I kind of decided that I wanted to get into more like a more commercial rock band. So I kind of shut down the punk band and started that band up, and that exposed me to a lot more other instruments other than loud guitar, distorted guitars and bass and drums. And so that kind of started, I think, and that kind of again led into production that way. It started to segue into that, and then friends' bands started asking me to work on their albums because I had kind of purchased some equipment to work on my own band, but pretty soon after I was doing more of that, and there is a time where you kind of have to give your band dream up for being a successful music artist that way. So it was kind of time to move on from that, and that's where I ended up in music in general. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was your first kind of taste of the film world?
Okay.
For film?
I know I jumped the gun there earlier. So yeah,
because you said when you two met, you got back into it. So what happened in the middle there?
Well, so two good friends of mine from high school, they went on to, one is a CGI compositor, the other one is a special effects artist, and they both work on major motion picture. But the compositor, he's an emerging director himself. So we're good friends, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do music on this film?" And I'm like, okay. And I was kind of in this. I think it was around October, and it was a horror film, and I was in a very dark place mentally anyway. So he sent me the
Perfect.
Yeah. So he sent me the picture, and I just remember I didn't have much in the way of gear, but I had recently purchased a popular software I think everyone knows called Omnisphere, and I just remember like throwing the video into my Pro Tools rig, and like I found a patch, and I just saw it against the picture. I was like, okay, yeah, this is cool. Like, it totally made me leap out of this like 3-minute format of songs that I was kind of deep down kind of like dying to break out of. So that was where I kind of first caught the bug for that.
Cool. And Martin, how about you? How did you start out?
Yeah, actually, it seems like Terry and I have similar backstories, and I feel like I want to talk to you afterwards about your band history. That's how I came up as well, man. I was born and raised in Victoria, BC, and met Dean and Tristan, the two other guys I composed with in Blitz, Berlin. We met at the end of high school, started a punk band, toured, did our first label deal, and moved out to Toronto, I guess, in like 2010, 2011. And shortly afterwards, sort of like the band more or less fell apart at that point, and we decided to sort of continue making music together, but weren't sure what that looked like. So we started experimenting with a lot of different sounds and making instrumental music for the first time, and learning how to record and produce our own stuff. And again, similar to Terry's story, basically there was actually a guy who was a music video director who had done a few of our music videos, who got his first bit of budget to make a movie and wasn't happy with who he'd been paired with for music. So we got the late night phone call. It's like, "Need you guys to score my movie," kind of thing. And we were like, no problem. No problem at all. And hung up the phone, and then we're like, oh no. And had to Google like,
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Literally no idea. So it was like a crash course in figuring out how to do that. And, basic technical things like how do you load a movie file into Logic? How do you like sync time code? Like that sort of stuff, which we just, had to ask Google a lot of questions. So we just kind of got thrown in the deep end and had to figure it out. And around the same time, we're lucky enough to have our music get in the hands of a music supervisor named Marcy Buckley, who's based in Los Angeles, and she works in movie trailers, and brought us on to work on the trailer campaign for The Girl on the Train, the Emily Blunt movie a few years ago, and basically heard something in our music that she wanted to work with and wanted us to create this piece for that trailer, but then also work with a Kanye West vocal. And that was like an entirely different experience. But in the span of a few years, we went from not knowing this could be a career to having a few of these jobs come our way that were way over our heads, and then having to sort of figure them out as we went. But we've always come from a sort of a DIY punk rock kind of background, and everything, you know, we make from scratch and figure out from scratch with each other. So we figure that the three of us combined make one pretty good composer. So we fill in each other's gaps a lot in terms of the technical side.
That's awesome. I was going to ask the question, what drew you to screen composition specifically, like in the beginning? But it sounds like it was thrown at all of you almost. It just happened to land in your lap, right? And then you were like, okay, well, I guess I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Let's go back to you, Michelle. What were the initial challenges when you first started out in film and TV composition?
So I guess like, well, the same as the guys, like just actually figuring out like learning a new door, and just like, I guess spotting was like one of the things that I'd like, where music should actually go in film was like the thing that was, I really was like, okay, you know, like I was actually writing wall-to-wall music in film, and I was like, well, that's actually not quite right. Like, and you know, it was like my first experience writing, and yeah, I just it was yeah, just a kind of a tricky.
And you said like, I remember you telling me like you kind of like would put music everywhere at first, right?
Yeah, I just like laid it all in, and I was like, okay, what's going to stick, and just kind of, yeah, just
and then
it around
started pulling things out a little bit, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely, I think that's one of the biggest challenges for definitely for us, and I think for a lot of composers is like restraint, because you typically are just like, oh, I want to do so much, I have so many ideas, and like obviously the story is number one, and figuring out how to yeah, restrain yourself for us is always difficult for sure as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we have our first question from the audience. So if this works for everybody, maybe I'll go back and forth as questions come in. I'll ask those questions on behalf of them, and then we'll go back to some other ones to fill it in. So the first question, and forgive me if I'm saying your name incorrectly, Taiji, I believe, says, hi everyone, absolutely love your works. Was just wondering if you prefer more freedom or more direction when you are scoring for film and TV.
Who wants to take that one?
Why don't you take that one, Martin?
All right. I would say it depends entirely on timeline, because if a director is bringing us a script and the film hasn't even been shot yet, and you know we're 6 months out from it coming together, then a blank canvas can be a lot of fun, because you can read what's on the page, get a feel for the characters, the emotional beats of the story, and then just kind of create with your own instincts. And that's a wonderful thing to do. But it takes time, and it's the kind of thing that if you try to rush and you have a blank canvas, you can make mistakes or go down the wrong pathways. A lot of the projects we work on, there is the odd one we have the luxury of that kind of time, but a lot of the time composers, especially in TV and stuff, aren't hired until like they're like the last person hired. Like the edits have been done, and then they start searching for a composer basically. So in that context, direction, for me anyways, is like my best friend. Like I ask a lot of questions in spotting sessions for that reason, to really get an accurate picture of the vision of the director. Every process is collaborative, but yeah, I would say that the shorter the timeline, the more direction you need, because there's just not time to experiment and see how you feel about something. It's like, if they want this bit to be scary and you're reading it differently, you might have just cost yourself like very valuable days in time. So yeah, I think I've known musicians throughout my life that really balk at the idea of being given too much of a structure to create in, but it's something that I personally find can be kind of inspiring when you're working with creators, directors and stuff who have a great vision and are very, very creative people and are thinking really actively about music. Then it's kind of just like having another member of the band when you create. So yeah, I would say it depends, but both can work.
And I could pick up a little bit there too on that one. And I think that like freedom is certainly something I think a lot of people want, in the way that they, you know, sometimes no one wants to be micromanaged, I think. And that's kind of, I think, maybe a bit of the question might allude to in maybe one of the not so great scenarios, if somebody starts to get into maybe talking about like what chords should be used, or they start to get a little bit too much like holding your hand a little bit on the paintbrush, so to speak. And I think but like Martin said, like how he asked so many questions, and I think that there, even if some like a director, and I haven't worked with a ton of directors, so I'm going to be upfront about that right now, but I have worked with artists as a producer, and like they're one and the same in the way that you have to take the clues that they give you, and even though they're not going to give you specific direction sometimes, and they're just like, I just want it to be this, they're going to give you like a reference. They're going to say, I really like this, and you know, what have you been listening to as a question, or you know, and work with that, and then against what is actually there, because sometimes a artist or director is going to think they have something different than they actually have, and that's for you to kind of give them enough of a glimpse of what they might think they are doing, but also sort of those parameters will eventually establish themselves by, again, what Martin said, like the time, how much direction they're giving you, and what they want deep down, what they want to hear, everyone's expecting to hear something. When they click play, they're always waiting for something specific. So you got to have an instinct for what that's going to be. You want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the same as Martin, like it is actually down to timeline. I feel that direction is very important. When you have like very short time to score, it's like you know, being like if you have like a very long timeline, it's a lot more easier to like, you know, explore ideas and like really try new ways of, you know, like, oh, I want to go this way. And but yeah, like timeline is a huge thing for sure,
which can be an advantage at times.
Exactly,
because it can reel everything in. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So direction for that reason.
Okay, we've got another question come in from Maggie this time. Whoops, and there's another one right over there, so I can't see the first one that I was going to read. There we go, back up. Okay. Is there a specific DAW that you recommend for composers to be knowledgeable with? As an emerging composer, should I focus and learn with one?
Well,
whoever wants to answer that one.
Okay, well, I'm going to come in because I'm the one using the DAW that everybody kind of goes like this to, which is Pro Tools. And so I think the general consensus is Cubase, Logic, Digital Performer is kind of a weird one, but Cubase or Logic you're going to hear a lot of, and that's if you're in the business of MIDI compositional mock-ups, and there are some pretty good features to get going quickly. Michelle works in Cubase. I've used Pro Tools so long that, and I have both other DAWs. I've purchased the other two, but I just know that like when the crunch comes down, and I'm more of somebody who likes to work with audio, not specifically MIDI. That's what it works for me. So to answer the question, whatever one that really makes you feel like you're connected to it as a tool, and it's a tentacle of you, not just something, you know, it's got to be fused in there with you. So I think, but Logic and Cubase would probably be the two that wouldn't hurt to look at.
Totally, yeah. I used to actually be a Logic user. I started on Logic, and I actually switched to Cubase because I actually had a film that I was working on overseas, and I wanted to take a really good laptop. So I got myself a Windows laptop, and it had lots of RAM and lots of hard drives and everything. So, and Windows is not, you can't use Logic on Windows. So I learned how to use Cubase a month before going overseas. And
wow.
And I was I threw myself into the deep end, and but then when I came back, I actually was like, you know what, I'm going to make the switch to Cubase, and I've been using it ever since. So yeah.
Nice. Man, so I've used Logic and only Logic, and anytime I've opened up another DAW, even ones that are supposed to be intuitive like Ableton, I'm just like, abort. It's just like everything's in the wrong place. What the heck, you know? So yeah, I would, to echo what the other two were saying, it's really whatever you connect with. All of the DAWs can do the job. I hear that Logic's better from MIDI, but I don't even think that's true anymore. I think that was like back in the day, and the other programs have probably caught up and are probably better at other stuff too. So yeah, whatever you connect with. I think Logic has a really low access or really low entry point, like cost wise, if you have a Mac. I think it's like a couple $100 and you pretty much get everything, which is can be a good place for people to start who don't have a big budget off the bat.
Ton of sounds with Logic. Like I was so surprised by like how much comes with it. Standard. Like, so yeah, like, I mean, it might have been something I would have looked into if I wasn't thousands deep into Avid, you know, like
for sure.
You know, it's like a mortgage payment, you know. Like,
yeah, no kidding. Oh man, yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with all
that. Okay. Next question is from Sal. Super inspired by your work. Any tips on marketing yourself to filmmakers?
I mean, the best, in my opinion, if you guys don't mind if I start, the best advice that I ever got in terms of spreading the word about your music, and this isn't exclusive to composers and filmmakers, this is in general as a musician, but is to just be as prolific as possible and to make as much music as possible. And then, you know, also put it out, don't just keep it in a hard drive and keep it secret. The more music you put out there, you never know what's going to connect with people. And in our case, that's been our mantra, and why we still release instrumental albums full of music that aren't in films and are just our sort of own creations, you know. Those aren't records that are a traditional rock album that we're going to go and like play shows with or something, but the really valuable thing is that they get into the hands of directors and they can listen to them and write to them and get a sense of what we're about, and that be a bit of a calling card. So that's what I would say. Just make music. It's the best way to advertise yourself.
Does anybody want to add to the question?
I actually feel the same as Martin. So it is about like just writing music and just building a portfolio. I tend to think like having, you know, trying different things as well, like different genres. Like I think it's always good to explore different styles and like and see what you're, you know, like gravitating towards. And like I actually started out writing a lot of orchestral music, and I've kind of verged more into like electronic experimental, and I write a lot of music for horror film. And I feel like that's kind of like the direction I've gone. But like, yeah, it's all about building, you know, like a show reel of work, and like, yeah, just putting that out there and onto, you know, SoundCloud and your website, and yeah.
And also inviting people in, and everyone has a different take on this. Some people stay relatively quiet and introverted, and then you have the other end of the spectrum where people have you know, like this really neat and tidy video series, and then there's a spot in the middle where you can invite people into your process a little bit, and then, you know, some people might say, you know, I didn't even know that, you know, you could do that. Like, you know, I'm gonna pass your name on somewhere, and let's also, I think we can all agree, right place, right time is a huge one, and that and being prepared for that. And like, I remember when, you know, Michelle and I first started hanging out, and we kind of, you know, we clicked on talking about film and music production, and she's like, you know, and I said, you know, I'd love to get back into it, and she's like, I'm gonna throw you some stuff, you know, and I was ready to jump in. Anything that she had to latch onto, I gave it like 10,000%, and now I can start to see it grow a little bit. So it is the right place, right time, by sometimes meeting the right person and somebody that can kind of send the elevator down for you and kind of give you a ride up, which, you know, can be tough when you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I kind of have a rural studio location, so I kind of chose that over kind of moving to the city, which I know kind of hurt me in some ways, but I really connect with the environment, and I just trusted that if I made really great music and I did my best to overcome the logistical kind of barrier, that things would progress eventually. So
one thing I'd
Nice.
like to add there as well is in terms of being prepared when you are in the right place in the right time, is the other best advice I could give is just to watch a ton of movies, because especially movies that are in the world that you're wanting to compose in, because it comes up all the time when we're meeting a new director or a new producer, being able to have the same vocabulary when they're referencing things off the top of their head, be it composers or certain styles of filmmaking or whatever. And if you're sitting there like, I don't know what you're talking about, it doesn't impart a lot of confidence. If you're able to sort of jib-jab with them on that and bounce names back and forth of directors and your favorite films, and I love this sequence for this reason, like, it shows that you really care about your craft and that you spend time thinking about it and learning about it as well, which I think is something a lot of creatives look for.
Okay. We've got a question from Patrick. Can you discuss a few highlights during the process of collaborating with the director of a project?
Do you want to take this one? Highlights.
So, sorry, what was the question again?
Highlights with working with the director.
So yeah, if there was any highlights during the process of collaborating with the director of a project.
Sorry,
Martin, do you have anything on this one?
Yeah, I mean,
It's okay if you don't.
let me think. Highlights. I mean, a lot of the most fun stuff. Yeah, I know. I'm making it sound awful. It's not awful. There are absolutely highlights for me. I don't know if it's a specific moment, but it's more like a phase in the project that is always a highlight on our end, which is when things are getting into more of a finishing stage. And typically in pre-COVID times anyways, is when we would have the director in the studio with us. And we're very fortunate to work with a lot of directors that we really love and respect, and very creative, brilliant people. And so when you've done a lot of the legwork of everybody's kind of agreed on the overall parts and the themes and the tones, and we're all in the right world, that finishing process can be a lot of fun because it is so immediate. And I've noticed directors always get a kick out of that because filmmaking is like the least immediate art form you could possibly have. If you have an idea to make a movie, you're like 5 years away from making that movie at that point. Whereas if a director is in the studio with us and we're finishing a film, they can be like, oh yeah, but like, what if it like sort of rose up into that cut? And you can just be like this. And they're like, and it's just this fun back and forth where you can really see a project lock in and come to fruition. It feels like there's a lot of excitement in the room when that's happening. So that's something I really enjoy.
I have a question to add to that topic in terms of COVID. How has it affected, the flow? I mean, this is one example of people not being able to come into the studio to be there for that. Is it different now? Do they zoom in and it's different experience, right? Like, how does that work?
Yep, it's all Zoom.
You just kind of have to do that. Yeah. I know at SOCAN, we work with a lot of, we work with all of you guys. You guys are all SOCAN members. Right? I'm pretty sure we checked into that first.
You better be.
You better be. And if you're not, we'll be talking now. So, we chat with a lot, and during COVID, the concern that I've heard mostly is, productions are just being pushed back. And I know some stuff is, when it reopens, like in Vancouver is a hot spot for films to be made there, right? And there's tax credits to be hiring people to work if they're in Vancouver, right?
Yes.
And if you're outside of the province, you're not getting the work. Has it affected you guys majorly during this time? How are you dealing with all that?
Like working remotely?
Yeah. It's not affecting your workload.
No, definitely not. Like, I
no?
think
Okay, good.
last year was actually a very strange year, but this year it's changed quite a bit. And I actually work with a lot of directors remotely as well. So it's actually feels like just another day in the studio for me. So yeah, which is great.
Okay. And schedules have been pretty continuous in terms of like timelines and stuff like that. Oh, good.
I think I've noticed that like there was actually quite a bit of a dip, but like this year is really, there's a lot of productions that have started up again. So it's great. So yeah.
I'm getting
good.
I was going to say that we're having the same kind of thing where there was a scary moment last year for sure when everything shut down, and a few of the bigger things we were attached to, we're really looking forward to, just got like indefinitely shelved. And like, oh God, what are we going to do? And then as everybody started figuring out how to move ahead with these productions, I'm actually finding there's a lot less questions being asked because everybody's in such a rush to just like, we got to make that movie. Oh, you guys are in, sure.
Oh.
It's I think in a similar way leading to a very busy 2021 for us, which is nice. 2020, like
that's great.
It's a little up in the air.
I think people need to move ahead now because there's so much uncertainty with like when things will get back to quote unquote normal. And so I think like if you can make it happen, then I think people are just saying like, let's just bite on it and do it because you're gonna like, I find any artistic project, sometimes it's all about that emotional steam behind it as well. And if it sits for, as Martin said, like some of these projects can have such a duration just based on the scope of like what they are. But there's also that like something, you get too far along and that becomes yesterday's work for somebody. And it can kind of lose that, that feeling for people. So I think people are trying to bite onto whatever they can,
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move back to another question. This one is from Kai Wen. Hey, great to see you. I'm wondering, when you are scoring for films, do you have an idea of what the final version is going to look like already, or do you figure that out when you see the footage? Do you want me to read that again?
I think are they asking about like, are you working with like a not finished version of the film? Is that what the question's about? Like, are you?
I think he's saying vision. No, I think he's asking about vision and do you visualize the project, the
musical
product?
Vision, or like, is it the musical vision or is it the actual?
Or maybe not. Sorry, maybe
the edit.
Let's get that again.
I'm not sure, Moira. If there's a follow up to the question, please do type it in. I'm going to read it again though. Okay. I'm wondering, when you're scoring for films, do you have an idea of what the final version is going to look like already, or do you figure that out when you saw the footage or when you see the footage?
So if it's based on like a musical component, like I have like a rough idea of just like, because I always sketch out some themes to start with, but like it can, like I might have an epiphany halfway through the film and I'll be like, oh, actually it needs this. And so my direction can kind of change through the process of writing for the film. But like I have some ideas to start with, but it can definitely change later down the road for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think with any project we all leave ourselves open to an epiphany that might happen. So you might be like, yeah, this is working. And then you kind of stumble on the jewel and then you're like, okay, now everything's got to match. I got to build the crown around the jewel now. It's like, okay, none of this is adding up to this now. So that's an exciting, but that's the best part. That's honestly the best part. And whether it's film or even like working on a song, it's like, it's you find that one special thing. And I feel like that, you can follow that, you can chase that thing right to the end.
Yep. Yeah, I agreed. I feel like when you're composing, that's such a key thing, even more than I guess I would say equal to the creating part is the listening part, and like listening to what you're doing, because if you're so dead set on making it sound like what you thought it was supposed to sound like, you can miss those golden moments. And a lot of times that's the best stuff, is the stuff you didn't plan. So that's very key to being open to those epiphanies, like you guys are saying.
Okay. Here's another question about DAW. Why are people averse to Pro Tools? I think we kind of,
yeah.
I don't know. Did you guys answer that? I mean,
well, I think
kind of what you like.
Yeah, I think the thing is with Pro Tools, is the fact that the MIDI component of Pro Tools is the part that like composers like working with MIDI and audio, but like the MIDI component is, I mean, it's getting better now. It's fantastic, but like, I still think that like, from my experience, like working in Logic and Cubase, they're great for composing with MIDI, but like, if it's if you're actually, you know, doing a lot of like audio work, I feel like that's where Pro Tools has got its advantages. As like, it's just so fluent for.
Yeah.
Like, would you agree?
Well, and yeah, I'll chime in because it's a software I've used for the last you know, since I got going, and I've done extensive research on why is it that everyone likes these other two DAWs so much more than this one. And I can't, you know, when I see Michelle work on Cubase and MIDI, if anyone out there doesn't know what that is, it's just electronic information that can trigger any samples coming out of your computer or hardware sense or whatever. So, but that there's a fluidity to like the editing and these other two programs that Pro Tools is often described as clunky. So if you were an orchestral composer and, you know, you were using sort of tons and tons of orchestral samples, Pro Tools might, if you were just starting out and coming into the gate, Pro Tools might not be the best choice. The thing is Pro Tools always is one of the final destinations for a project at the end of the day. So a lot of composers, you see printing rigs where the audio, once it's all mapped out in the compositional DAW, it's all printed into Pro Tools. That being said, I think you can get by with just about anything that can do this stuff these days. But I will agree with Michelle that it certainly lacks in the electronic programming department over the other two. But you can use it. I say go ahead. If you like it, then rock it.
Yeah, man. Honestly, there's like kids making like top 10 singles in Fruity Loops at the moment. Like there's whatever DAW you have, you can make it do a lot. So whatever you get your hands on first, just start making music with it.
I have a question about group work versus independent work. How does it differ? How does the process differ? You know, like if you're collaborating on a project together, as opposed to independently plowing through the work. Martin, I guess that'll be a good one for you in terms of your group work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the collaborative process for us often takes different forms depending on what's needed. In our case, specifically with the three of us, we kind of approach every problem in life in a collaborative manner because we've just been like friends and a band and a kind of pseudo business for a long time. So, you know, when we were first moving to the United States, the hurdle was getting our visas. And so we split that up like, okay, well, you call the lawyer and like you deal with like the letters of whatever, and you deal with the press clippings and that sort of thing. So any problem we try to attack and figure out who's going to be best at what. So I think when we got into film composing, we kind of each specialized a little bit. And I guess depending on the project, it can work in all different ways, but myself and Diener will typically work more on the arranging side in terms of like the first stab at a project and getting in the notes and chords and movements and all that sort of stuff. Tristan really specializes in programming and in percussion and in production and mixing as well. So a lot of times he'll take our rough idea and then make it sound like a Hans Zimmer piece. And so we'll pass things back and forth. And it's different on every project. Right now we're working on a TV show and we essentially each try to have at least one pass of every part of every episode before sending it to the showrunners. And then when we get notes and do a version 2, we try to each touch that once as well. So we each get a chance to create in each part, clean in each part, and interpret each other's ideas as well. I think we worked together for so long that in our case, there's a bit of a nonverbal communication that we have very similar instincts when it comes to what needs to happen in the part. So it works pretty well in our case.
I think you should.
Oh.
I think you should pick up on this because
Look, they're working together right now.
because I've come in and started to help you out, so you might be good to answer how that's affected your workflow, because I know you've collaborated before. But
so I guess one thing I do love about the collaborating process is the fact that there is because you do have to wear multiple hats as a composer. So you have to be a producer, and then you have to be the composer. And sometimes it's nice to actually have the opportunity to have someone else in the room. Like while you might write a cue and be like, oh, what, and the other person will be listening and be like, oh yeah, they have some ideas. And it's like that process is actually it's a good process. Like, yeah.
And that feeding off of each other's ideas, as you guys kind of, as you mentioned, Martin, like we will, Michelle typically starts these things off, and then I'll get kind of a batch of stuff, and then I'll generate some new stuff, but then I'll mutate some of her stuff, and then she'll get that back, and then she starts to even kind of expand on those. And then by the time we kind of get to the end of something, we've crossed the DNA to a point where you're walking away from their space and going, okay, like I know a new way to approach like this one sound based on what Michelle's doing up in her studio upstairs. And so it's really cool because it just like kind of creatively like snowballs. And
yeah,
totally. I think that when you're collaborating in a positive way, you're ideally making something that's kind of greater than the sum of its parts. So you'll end up hearing it and be like, none of us on our own would have made something that sounded quite like that. So that's I think what makes it special and worth the technical complication, I suppose, is very worth it.
Also that comfort of like people in your corner too, like it's just like you're up against a project of any type, and like there is a sense of just, it's like when you're camping in the woods by yourself versus like with friends, right? You don't feel as scared when like there's two other people in the tent with you, like, it's kind of
absolutely. That's a big thing is watching each other's backs and writer's block is a real thing. You'll get up to a point and just be like, I've tried a bunch here, nothing's working, and then somebody else first try is like, what about this? And it works. You're like, that's
here we go.
They're like, F you, man. Like, how is that easy for you?
Jackson asks, can you describe the difference in the creative process for you when scoring for film as opposed to writing or producing your own music, your own self-released music?
Yeah.
You want to grab on that one, Martin?
Sure. It is definitely different parts of the brain. I think both can be equally creative and fulfilling in different ways, but I find that one ends up being kind of a salve to the other. Whereas if all we've done is work on films and work, you're working creatively, but you're also working for someone else's vision. I find that there is this need to sort of scratch the creative itch, just like make something that isn't for a reason. It's just to create the way that you naturally want to. But then I also find when you do enough of that and you've been self-indulgent for a while, it's like, man, I could really use some direction. So I think for me, one feeds the other. They're totally different parts of the brain. One is introspective and fickle, I would say, making your own music can be. Whereas if there's these external drivers and this vision and this thing to live up to and work on, it's a whole different kind of energy you bring to that sort of project. Both fulfilling, but definitely different.
Yeah, it kind of like when you're working on a film, you have limitations as well. So it's like when you write your own music, for me, my experience has always been, which way am I going to go? Like, what instruments are going to play? And like it's this huge, it can be overwhelming. But like I find with film, it's just like, okay, you have this world that you have to, what you have, and both, I love both experiences, but they are like, one is very, open and the other one is very like, okay, you have a brief and this is the world that you're working in, and it's to me that's where it's a little bit different. So
well, and I always wondered why it was so easy to produce a song for somebody else, and then when you sit down to write your own thing, I'm like, man, what happened to that fire, you know? And it's because it's that headspace is just like, because you're deciding like kind of who you want to be in a sound format, you know? So again, that can be very agonizing at times, and it ends up with a lot of tidbits, a lot of gigabytes on your hard drive that are still kind of, hey, remember me? Like
Definitely.
This is a good one. What is your favorite movie score?
That's a tricky one. There's so many. There's like,
yeah, God.
I'm gonna say Gone Girl jumped me in huge. The Reznor scores are huge for me. They got me seeing a whole other side of film music that, like, you know, in the same way punk rock made me feel like I could actually play in a band. I feel like Reznor's scores like kind of made me kind of go, oh, you know, you don't have to be John Williams or you know, like some of these greats to do it, you know, like, and that doesn't take away from like how hard it is, but it just showed like another side of where this craft is going. And so yeah, that one particularly stood out for me.
I think one of my favorites was when I was a kid. I loved Back to the Future. So Alan Silvestri was like that, like just that theme was just, you know, and I love that scale as well. It's octatonic scale, so it's a very dissonant kind of sounding scale, and just the themes and the variations of that whole score is like phenomenal. And I always wanted to write that style music, but I've gone a completely different direction now. And now, like, actually one of my favorite scores right now, I love Tenet. Like, I am just drawn to that Ludwig Göransson. Is that his name?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I love that score. So that's another one of my favorites right now.
Yeah,
so.
That's brilliant. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it is hard to choose. Probably say the original Blade Runner score is something that I probably spent the most time listening to, you know, and definitely shaped the way that I thought about film music. But in terms of just like the one I probably listened to the most, honestly, and just like love the most for all of its ridiculousness is the Escape from LA score.
Nice. I didn't see that coming.
Just the John Carpenter, like rock and roll guitar, harmonica, but you know, there's something about it that is so fun and atypical for a film score. Some of it sounds like a dad band jamming in a garage or something. I don't know. It's in its own world thoroughly, but I really love the camp of that film. So.
Totally.
I've got one. What do you wish you knew as an emerging composer trying to break into the industry?
The question, what do you wish you knew as putting yourself back as an emerging composer? What do you wish you knew at that time? What's some information? What could you tell yourself? Apply back and tell yourself. I'm still emerging, so I to be honest, I can't be talking to myself right now. So it's a better question for these two.
That's a really good question. I have to think about that one actually. I'll pass that one on to you.
Yeah, I guess for me it would just be encouragement. It's less about like telling you to specifically do one thing or specifically do a different one. It's like if you're interested in composing for film, there's so much work out there. There's so many amazing films and television shows and short films and all different types of visual media nowadays that needs music. And if you have original ideas and an original voice that you want to bring to that world, I guess in your starting out, all I would want to do is be like, do it. Don't second guess yourself. Just do it. Make some music. That's all there is to it, really. Just start creating and exploring that space. And if you like it, then keep making it. Because I feel like really loving the craft is so important. And I think anybody, when they start out, we were no different. We were full of doubt and questions and like, is this even something I can do? Like, you know, I didn't go to school to like conduct an orchestra, so therefore am I not qualified for this job? Like, you have all sorts of ways of talking yourself out of being able to do a job. So what I would encourage virtually any young person, and my past self included, would just be like, just don't second guess it. Just make music, have fun with it, and make something that you think is good and exciting, you want to share.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I think just take it day by day. Enjoy the process, write music, have a great time with it. You know, it does take time. It is a very tough industry to get into, but like, you know, hang in there and, you know, yeah, keep creating, always keep creating, and just love what you do. And, you know, like, yeah.
And
like,
you said that was the best advice you got from a teacher, right?
Yeah, I remember when I started out and I was like, oh, I just really want to get straight into film, and I finished my degree and I wanted to just start scoring straight away, and there was nothing. And I was like, what happens? Like, why aren't I getting any calls? And I was like, you know, putting myself out there and expecting to get all this work, but it doesn't work that way. It's like a day-by-day process, and you have to be you have to persevere, and you have to keep writing music, and you know, it's gonna, you know, like, hang in there. It's the best advice for sure.
Awesome. Sue says, big fan, thanks for sharing your insights. I'm just wondering if there's something that sucks about the composing process. What's your least favorite part of the job?
My least favorite part of the job is when a director has temp love and you have to, like, you know, get them to, you know, like a lot of directors get very attached to other scores, and, you know, like that process of actually, you know, like, and yeah, it's just like that part is just the word, yeah, like temp music is just, you know, I try to, like, I don't even know where, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think about, yeah, when they get very attached to temp music, that's the thing. It's just like, I you know, like, I'm trying,
you have to unsell them on that music.
Yeah, you have to unsell them on that music, and it is really it can be very, very tough. They might have something that might not necessarily work for a scene, like I might have a great idea, and it's just like, oh, you know, this, and they're like, oh, well, this is what I think would work, and it's just like, well, you know, that part I always find is kind of tricky, because it's like, well, you know, I don't want to write, say, a Thomas Newman thing for something that doesn't really, it might actually be their favorite piece of music, but it's like, you know, I have this idea, which I think, you know, and it's part of the selling process of it's tricky. It can be very, very tricky. That's the part that I find very, yeah, my least favorite.
Definitely. Temp love is frustrating, and it happens on all sorts of projects, and a lot of times the thing that they love is like, yeah, but I have the music for Indiana Jones in there. Why can't you just, you know, do it more like that? I'm like, well, there's a few reasons. First of all, I'm not good enough to do that. So I feel like temp love is frustrating for sure. One of the things is kind of unavoidable, and you can't really hold anybody responsible for it, because the creative process is always evolving. But it definitely is frustrating when a director will give you specific direction on something that they want, and then utterly change their mind without telling you later on. So you'll deliver something, and they were like, I want this like electronic and like, you know, brooding and whatever. And then they were like, where's all the violins? I'm like, well, what you said, this other thing, and I wrote it down.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can gripe about that, but honestly, like with any creative process, when you hear something in a mix or you see something, it often isn't quite the way that you imagined. So,
Exactly.
you know, as long as as long as the director is being kind and creative and collaborative and owning those decisions, then it takes the sting out of those things. But it can be frustrating for sure.
I can jump in with something here too. So, and I learned this on my first film is picture lock versus rough cut. And if you're going to start working to some picture that's not edited and locked, then it's a tough thing because your brain just works it in because you want to hear it a certain way, but you cannot get attached at that point, because when they send you the next edit and you're like, oh, you just dropped a nuke on this, and you're like, okay, here we go again, and you're pulling it all apart. So that's one of the things I found incredibly frustrating. And my buddy was a new director too, and he was really trying to just figure out his editing process as well. And but I was like spending all this time on the music and like, man, it's locked, it's good to go. And then this other cut comes through and it's like, what happened? So anyways, that's definitely something that will frustrate. And I think changing your perspective on the work you do to some video that's not picture locked is good, because just if I do, and happens in commercials as well, you half an hour later they send you another cut and you're like, oh my God, I just finally shaped this thing out.
And it's 2 in the morning.
Yeah. but I kind of tell myself, try to anyways, it depends what kind of mood I'm having that day, but I try to tell myself, this is going to get blown apart, so just be ready for it, and you won't get super angry, or you won't get irritable, or
and I guess coming from that as well is just like, if you do get like a rough cut or a fine cut, like just know that there are going to potentially be changes to that edit, and maybe not do too much detail. And that's just from from experience, like from our experience.
100%.
Just don't do heaps of detail.
What I would add to that, honestly, is it's not just rough cut to picture lock, it's picture lock to picture lock final 2, picture lock final 2.5, and you're like, I thought this was locked. That can be a challenge.
Yeah, very, very challenging.
Okay, we're nearing the end here. We have one last audience question. The question is, do you guys have ideas about how you would like to approach a score from a non-traditional framework? And an example is Arrival by Johan Johansson.
Nice.
So not conventionally,
so
approaching from an unconventional framework.
From a non-traditional framework, yeah.
Well, that's easy for me, because I'm not conventional. I don't have that a bone of conventional scoring in my body, so that's where I just come from. It's like I'm gonna do something that could, because I'm making up for a lack of Michelle has these amazing composition and theoretical skills that I just don't have, but I know I have an instinct for what I feel will work for things and what gives a cool vibe. So that's kind of something that's built into me, just because that's my way forward. But maybe for you, that might be a question, because you do come from more of an orchestral and a classical kind of place.
Yeah, but I have actually been working on some projects in an unconventional way, and my way that I would sometimes do that is like, because I work a lot in modular sense, and I might actually do like our recordings, and I'll build up a library of different sounds, like whether they're drones or like pulses, and then I'll be thinking about the film as well, and I'll be like, oh, these tones could work really nicely for the film, and then I might experiment by putting them next to picture and seeing how they work. Like, so they're not actually written to picture, but they're actually something that I'm visually interpreting while I'm playing. And then I'll place those audio tracks and see how they might work as kind of happy accidents, I guess. And I guess that's kind of an unconventional way.
It is. It's a great process.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Isn't that the best, when you drop in an idea and it just work? You're like,
exactly. It's just like, okay, that's it.
freebie. Oh my God, don't touch anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. yeah, I guess not to get too like in our own heads about this, but like even the term conventional, like I kind of push back against, because what is that nowadays? You know, like conventional in the 80s maybe was a John Williams score or a Sylvester score or something. Conventional now, like what is that? Is that like Stranger Things everybody's sort of like vamping on? Like I don't know. Conventions change all the time. And I think maybe the question is more about like a traditional like non-musical approach, and there's a lot of elements in that Arrival score that are maybe like the sort of babbling vocal and stuff that you might not typically put in a musical score. And in regards to that, something that we specifically have experience in that can be a fun starting point is through sampling, which is, for anybody that's not experienced with it, it's more or less just like recording bits of audio and then reworking and manipulating them. There was a film that we worked on a while ago where, for example, there was multiple scenes where a mother was using a breast pump, which has this like motorized kind of strange gurgling sort of sound. And it's used in this pacing, slow, creepy way. And there's a lot of it exposed from like the location recording of the film. So we ended up taking that and sampling it and pitching it down and using it as part of our kind of like synthesizer, like bass sort of verbal along the way that felt unconventional, but also felt in the world of the film. So it was actually like from the textures that were there. So there's all sorts of different ways to figure your way into making a score with non-musical elements, but sampling can be a lot of fun, but be careful because it can be very legal. So sample stuff that you know is public domain or from the film you're working on. But yeah, that can be fun.
That is a good piece of advice coming from SOCAN as well.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today. I want to thank all three of you, Terry, Michelle, and Martin, for sharing and taking the time to speak on your process and what you've experienced. And thanks to the Kingston Canadian Film Festival for putting this on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
All right.
Ending live. I see some text there.
She's right. It is awkward. Are we ended?
Awkward.
That end.